a huge kingdom made of ice that sends between 10,000 and 15,000 icebergs into the ocean every year. But this is not Antarctica, the Titanic sinking iceberg that broke off here. 81% of an area the size of Mexico is covered by ice, which can be up to 3 kilometers thick in some places. Almost 2,500 billion cubic kilometers of ice and snow. White land would be a good name for this place, but its real name, Greenland, is about as strange as you can get. No one knows exactly why that is, but maybe the answer is under the ice in Greenland. It keeps secrets that can shock and even scare you. What's under the ice in Greenland? Greenland doesn't hide one of its secrets under the ice. Instead, it keeps it almost in plain sight. It gave researchers something to think about for a long time. This strange rock formation looks like a hole and is near the city of Monadnock. The size of the rock is more than impressive. It is about 100 kilometers across. So the impact crater theory was born, and it was even put forward officially in 2012. Scientists think that our world and a rock or comet crashed into each other here 3 billion years ago. Over time, erosion destroyed part of the crater and sank it almost 23 kilometers below the surface. It would be the oldest impact mark on Earth if the theory were confirmed. But Canadian scientists tested the volcanic rocks in Monadnock, and they turned out to be the same as those found outside the area thought to be affected. This means that they were formed by the same geological processes as a strange magnetic oddity. In a study that was published in Earth and Planetary Science Letters, the different ideas about this strange thing were explained. The strange structure didn't come from a cosmic crash. Instead, it was made by a secret geological process that happened a long time ago, but no one knows what it is. So, the Yarrabubba crater in Western Australia is still the oldest known impact crater on Earth. It is 2.23 billion years old. But the scientific community didn't stay sad for long. A few years later, Greenland surprised everyone once more with an impressive performance. Under the ice cap of the island, there was a forest covered in signs, but it was still very impressive. Discovery dates back a long time, almost to the middle of the 20th century. From 1959 to 1967, the U.S. military ran a research base in Greenland to study the Arctic. In 1966, scientists did an experiment that, given the technology of the time, was very complicated and bold. They drilled into a glacier until they hit the subglacial dirt at a depth of 1,368 meters and took out a 14-meter-long core. The last 3.44 meters were made up of dirt that had been sitting under the ice for a time that is unknown. The research base's main goal was to help the military, so it didn't study the dirt very deeply. The frozen core sat on a shelf and was forgotten for many years, which turned out to be a good thing. Since there were no current ways to analyze things in the middle of the 20th century, the unique sample would have probably been thrown away. But in 2017, someone remembered what had happened in the past. The sample was taken out of storage and carefully looked at over a number of years. Fortunately, researchers now had access to cutting-edge techniques like electron imaging, energy-dispersive X-ray spectroscopy, cosmogenic nuclides, and more. So when studying the Greenland samples, the shocked scientists found twigs and leaves instead of sand and stones 1.5 kilometers under the ice. The biggest island on Earth, it turned out, didn't have an ice sheet until fairly recently and was covered in green forest. The study was published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Andrew Christ, one of the study's writers, says, "Ice storms usually crush and kill everything in their path, but what we found was delicate plant structures perfectly preserved. Even though they are fossils, they look like they just died." He said, "It's a time capsule that shows what used to live on Greenland." The surprising find is important for understanding the Earth's past as well as other things. The Greenland glaciers, which are melting at a high rate because of global warming, hold enough water to raise sea levels by more than a meter, according to the most optimistic predictions. If we know how this ice has gone away in the past, we'll be better able to predict how the climate will change in the next 50 years. And now, let's look at another amazing science finding that rocked the world in 2021. Subglacial lakes have been covered in the past in both Greenland and Antarctica, so there isn't anything strange about them. But one of these discoveries came close to being a big deal. The origin of these ponds comes from the glacier covered from the lake itself, and the majority of these previously dispersed lakes only contain water stuck in ice or between rocks and ice. But the newly discovered Paleo Lake probably formed when there was no ice around it. This means that we are dealing with a real time capsule that has kept everything that was here when Greenland was really Greenland. The bottom sediments of a huge ancient lake that had been hidden by the 1.8-kilometer Greenland ice sheet are the most valuable and interesting thing that scientists have discovered. This was the first time a subglacial formation like this had ever been found anywhere in the world. The Earth Institute at Columbia University published the study. The lake bed could be hundreds of thousands of years old or even millions of years old. It has fossils and chemicals that show how the temperature and life were in the past. Researchers have made a thorough map of the lake body and the area around it. As part of NASA's Ice Bridge effort, aircraft flew low over the ice sheet to collect radar, gravimetric, and magnetic readings, which the scientists then looked at. Ice-penetrating radar made a full map of the land surface under the ice, showing the shape of a smooth, low pool between the rocks. Measurements have shown that the material in the pit is less dense than the hard rock around it. This is a clear sign that the material has been there for a long time, including layers that came from living things. All the information showed that there was a big lake in this area that covered about 7,100 square kilometers. To give you an idea of how big it is, it's a lot bigger than the state of Delaware. The researchers figured out that the lake was between 50 and 250 meters deep, and the rocks at the bottom are an amazing 1.2 kilometers thick. What these minerals might have is still a puzzle. The discovered lake bed, however, may contain a complete, unaltered collection of fossils and chemical markers from a time in the past that is now unknown. Guy Paxman, a researcher at Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory and the report's main author, said that this could be a very important source of information about a landscape that is completely hidden and unavailable right now. We're attempting to understand how the Greenland ice sheet has changed over the past few decades. If we want to understand how it will act in the coming decades, it's important to know how it will act. And since we're talking about the next few decades, other researchers have some bad news for us. The fact that the Greenland ice sheet is melting has been known for a long time, but only recently has an international study team discovered that it could all melt away by the middle of this century. The lakes that are building on the top of the glacier are to blame. Because of global warming, they are growing quickly and merging together to make bigger lakes. When water gets into the shield's base, it transfers heat and speeds up the destruction from the inside. Because of this, there are clear cracks that speed up the flow of water from other lakes. The melting of ice can be sped up by 400%, according to the researchers, in such a chain reaction. Paul Christopherson of the University of Cambridge, who was part of the study group, confirmed this. The ice sheet was pretty safe 25 years ago, but now it loses 1 billion tons of ice every day. This makes the sea level rise 1 millimeter around the world every year, which is much faster than what scientists expected just a few years ago. Ecologists say that the new lakes would not have been there if the glacier's core hadn't been directly exposed to heat. They used to take weeks or even months to show up, but now they do so in just a few hours. Scientists have developed a 3D model based on observational data from the past year to produce a more accurate estimate. In one of the suggested situations, it was shown that up to 124 lakes can drain in 5 days, and their networks can be as long as 135 kilometers. Based on these numbers, it seems likely that the whole Greenland ice sheet will melt by the middle of the 21st century. Christopherson continued, "A chain reaction can cause a very fast transfer of water and heat from the surface to the bed. In one case, we found that 58 of the 59 lakes we saw drained at the same time. Just think about it. There may come a time when Greenland changes into something completely different, like this. It's not hard to figure out what will happen to the sea level around the world. Just the melting of Greenland would raise sea levels by a few meters. There are a lot of different figures, but none of them are good. Seems like we should sound the alarm. In fact, activists have been yelling about the coming disaster for more than a year now. But when these terrible predictions are taken into account, many experts notice that Greenland's leaders act in an oddly passive way, and this unspoken agreement has a clear, if very cynical, explanation. Greenland is going to get very rich when the ice melts. Narsek is a small town in the south of Greenland that looks like a village. It is home to about 1,200 people. Initial figures say that the area close has as much as a quarter of the world's rare metal reserves. Today, elements like terbium, cerium, lanthanum, and praseodymium are rare gems, and gold doesn't even come close to how valuable they are. These metals are very important for high technology. They are used in everything from cell phones to nuclear plants. On the island, there are a lot of places like Narsek, and even more places that are, for the most part, still empty. Greenland has almost 40 million tons of rare metals that are just waiting for their time to shine. If you take Greenland out of the picture, the world's stocks are 120 million tons. Denmark's possible income is so huge that you don't even need a computer to figure it out. Researchers keep finding new amounts of iron, zinc, vanadium, chrome ores, nickel platinoids, and diamonds in Greenland that were not known before. All of these riches are a nightmare for whole countries, let alone profit-hungry magnates. Up until now, Greenland's ice sheet has made it impossible to use the island's natural resources in a major way for economic purposes. But because of global warming, a new gold rush is closer than it has ever been.